Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Smoking Room. This time we're gonna be talking about one of the biggest themes Rikishi writes about, which is forgiveness. This episode is gonna have spoilers for Higurashi and Umineko. We'll see about Ciconia. If we do reach Ciconia spoilers, we'll tell you about it. But it's not planned to talk about. We're not planning to talk about Ciconia. If it happens, it happens, and you will know. For now, Higurashi and Umineko spoilers. I'm Des, and I'm here with.
Kia ora, I'm Horsefry.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Marcy.
Okay, so for the new people here, you want to introduce yourselves? Tell the audience a bit about your experience with When They Cry. Whichever works, just somebody go first. Doesn't matter who it is.
Alright, fine. Hi, I'm Kyle.
Hello, Kyle.
I first got into When They Cry with the Higurashi anime 3 years ago. I immediately kind of fell in love with it, especially the second season. I got into Umineko almost exactly a year ago, and it has been eating at my brain since that moment.
Damn, you're a recent fan then.
Yeah, I apparently only finished EP8 in like the beginning of January, but I don't know.
Then it hasn't been. It's been a year since you finished, but then you've probably been reading.
Yeah.
Umineko for it. Like
I read Umineko
I don't know
for like 2.5
how much time
months.
did you spend reading Umineko?
I burned through Umineko.
Okay, so
I like started at the end of November and ended at the end of January.
Oh wow,
It's crazy.
Yeah, you really powered through it then.
I was reading my notes the other day and found that I apparently watched Go and Sotsu in the middle of the answer arcs, and I'm like, how did I have time for that?
I don't know how you did that.
And then I guess I just, brain rot.
yeah.
That's what happens.
Okay, what about you then, Marcy?
I guess by contrast, I got into When They Cry when I was in elementary school, which I probably should not have. It was because
we have an actual Furude with us.
Yeah, it was basically like so what happened was that was around sort of the era of like, you know, mid 2000s, like everybody is into every anime that exists if you're an anime fan, because we have so little of it to go around. Well, it's basically like, you know, because it was such a niche community at the time.
Did you just...
Well, yeah, I mean...
Wait a minute, isn't elementary school like from the first year to the fourth year?
Well, I was about like in, say, like 4th, 5th grade at the time.
Still,
yeah,
what the
like,
hell? That's a
basically... In America, like, there was so little anime to go around and so very few people who were into it that, like, if you were, then you just had to take what you could get. Like, we didn't have that much. So Higurashi was one of those that I would see, like, different memes about and stuff when the anime was airing. So I watched that. It probably traumatized me a little bit.
Wait, what? You were consuming memes in elementary school? What the heck?
Well, I say memes, what you would basically call memes now, I suppose.
Yeah, I get that much, but damn, you were introduced to internet culture very early.
Yeah. But so from there, I watched the anime, had a very shocking experience with it, but it still like really stuck with me because beyond being scared of it, I did really like the characters. I liked what people had to say about it. A couple years later, I ended up reading the VN, which I enjoyed way more. And then as Umineko was coming out, being sort of translated for the first time by Witch Hunt, I hopped onto that. First time around, I was like, I don't get it. They're rich people? Who cares? Came back to it a few years later when I was a little bit older and was able to appreciate it a bit more fully and kind of fell in love with it from there. Read the manga after that. Read the Higurashi manga at some point after that. I've never watched the Umineko anime in full because I don't hate myself. And here we are.
Amazing. Okay. Introductions out of the way. What we want to talk about, people?
So, Horsefry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Horsefry has already been on an episode.
I have.
Oh, right,
yesterday.
yeah, right. I just wasn't there.
And we by accident teased today's episode.
Yeah, we did.
The weekend we're recording this, we're gonna upload that episode, and from today onwards, people are gonna know we are recording this episode today.
All right. Good to
No
know.
pressure.
So this is what we're building up to here. We have a lead up.
Yeah. There's been tension. There's been a trailer. There's been the whole works. People have been really anticipating.
There's been a trailer full of spoilers for this episode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it wouldn't be the first time we would release a trailer with spoilers, am I right?
Oh, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't
We
do
wouldn't
that.
do that. That could never happen.
All right.
Okay. So, Horsefly, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so as you said, the topic is the themes of forgiveness and when they cry. I think, and it sounds like people agree with me, we should start by talking about, I think Teppei from Higurashi shows up in CH3, Tatada Goroshi. I think he's logical to start with because like there's not really any forgiveness to be had with this character. He's kind of just an absolute piece of shit, and the main character bludgeons him to death with a baseball bat as he's riding past on his motorbike. And it's one of the most hype moments in When They Cry. But I think Ryukishi actually regretted writing that, and I don't have a lot of evidence for that, but I do have Rosa in Umineko later on. I think was a better written version of Teppei. Maybe not like he didn't have to be written that way. I think he's fine the way he's written. Like you don't have to excuse all of your problematic characters as we proved yesterday. But yeah, I think Teppei was just so horrible that everyone cheered when he died, and there's the Meakashi staff room where Rikishi 7 talks about murder, like tries to go through the thought process of like, is murder ever justifiable? He says one interesting thing. He says by degrading the life of the victims in these scenes he's talking about, murder scenes. The players can sympathize with the character, and by character he means the murderer, more easily. Which always struck me as like a bit like, I didn't really I wrote Teppei and I didn't really value his life very much. He kind of exists just to be killed.
And hated.
And hated, yeah. For good reason.
I thought it was really interesting what you brought up the other time about how understanding Ryukishi's own backstory, IRL backstory, is like helps you understand his thought process behind his characters, because he was a social worker for 10 years, I believe, and that is he obviously used real life stories as inspiration for Satoko and Maria. And I think your point yesterday was that he maybe regretted writing Teppei as like purely evil, because even though he was a social worker, he acknowledges that child abusers come in all sorts of different shapes, and some of them are horrible people, and some of them look like good people on the outside, but you don't actually know what's going on, and that would be Rosa, who's written after Teppei.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I think if I can... Oh, sorry. I didn't want to overtalk, but if I could make an interjection. Yeah, I think with Teppei, especially in Tatari Goroshi, to me, what seems to be sort of the tragedy of the situation isn't so much Teppei dying, because nobody reading at that point cares about that. But I think what we are meant to care about more in that moment is just, it's tragic that Keiichi has been pushed to that point, that the situation exists where he feels like he needs to do that, where there is an adult in all of their collective lives that they cannot feel safe around, that is like hurting somebody that they love. It's just, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, a kid shouldn't have to do this. We don't blame him for doing it, but it's still a terrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for our muted member in the call right now, AD, the point it's making is like Teppei doesn't only exist to be killed, like we were saying. He also exists to prove the point of how poorly these kinds of child protection services work in Japan.
Yeah.
Like, look, these services exist. That doesn't mean they're working right. Look at all this bullshit going on.
Okay, so about the staff rooms and about that, in the one for Matsuri Bayashi, not Minaguroshi, apparently, Ryukishi says a couple things about Tatari Goroshi. About how, first up, in Minaguroshi, he was like, he apologized for portraying social workers like that. Because he's like, they are the heroes of our society. They are really important, and they do their job. But these ones specifically don't. Which is kind of interesting to me. But he also said, about those two chapters in specific, that if this was like a normal novel, or like a normal anime style like battle thing, that killing Teppei would be the right answer. If this story was an exercise in violence, killing Teppei is the correct answer. But it's not. And then he goes on to say that because one of the themes of Higurashi is talking about, like, it's just talking about your problems with people close to you, that according to him, he just kind of coyly hints that maybe the answer they get in Minaguroshi also isn't the best way to deal with it. Which is interesting to me. Because he doesn't explain what he thinks is the best answer, because I guess how could he?
Yeah.
I don't understand how the answer in Minaguroshi isn't the right answer.
Yeah. What's the quote?
They did everything by the book, and they succeeded. They just couldn't possibly foresee that Lady Hitler was waiting for them.
According to that logic, the Minaguroshi chapter isn't the best resolution for the problems that surround Sadako either. Do you understand that? He's talking about that when he's like, in a lot of stories, you have an enemy that needs to be defeated, and they're not really seen as a person. Or if you have a villain that is seen as a person, that maybe, like, the heroes and the villains will find a third enemy that they have to join forces to defeat. And then he says that quote, and it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That is true.
I think...
And that does arc back to Rosa, of how he wrote a sympathetic villain later on, using the same, like, basis of this person is a child abuser, but this time I'll make them sympathetic. Or, yeah. Like, it isn't just a person to be defeated. It's someone like, maybe you can defeat Rosa, but...
I really want to see Battler. Like, EVA Battler. Just, like, fight Rosa.
That's it on Rosa. It's over. I've had enough.
In red, I'll say it in red, Rosa. You're a terrible mother.
Okay, new witty message. Ryukishi goes to pretty great lengths to create Matsuri Bayashi as a story with no need for a villain to be a scapegoat for the issues. Yes, Takano is the antagonist, but we're meant to feel for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so in that sense, when he's talking about like what the best resolution for Satoko would be, I think I mean, obviously I can't speak exactly for what he's thinking because he didn't say exactly what he was thinking, but I think in a sense it's kind of like calling into question like, well, okay, you know, obviously things got to the point where this was their solution, but maybe if something had been addressed earlier on, then it wouldn't have gotten to this point.
I'm thinking
or if
about
Satoko
it, right?
didn't have so many problems that would make her not want to disclose what was happening. It's like the main problem was Satoko not being truthful to the social workers and telling them like, yes, I'm being treated poorly, because she felt like an obligation to be there to prove to herself that she was capable of dealing with Teppei, so that Satoshi could come back, because she feels guilty for Satoshi living since he was always protecting her.
And it's, well, I mean, like, obviously you can't blame Satoko for not, like, disclosing all of her feelings. She is a child, but also, like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, maybe, you know, if all of her friends had sat down and really had a discussion with her about this earlier, then maybe, you know, some of these things could have at least been slowed down.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about, because I think Satoko understands that she's also responsible for things escalating there. I think Satoko acknowledges that she also is a problem in this problem, because in Tsumi Horoboshi, when everyone is gathered around Rena, and they're not even, no, before they gather around Rena, they're in the school, and they're talking about how to help Rena, and Satoko is the one who says, yes, you should approach your friends and tell them about what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
So Satoko does understand she needs to do that, which adds another layer to Satoko. I don't know how people think Satoko isn't a good character.
She's great.
Character. Come on.
Satoko's a great character.
I've been thinking about like this quote unquote proper resolution to Tarigoroshi for a second now. And I keep thinking, surely Ryukishi's not saying that like Sotsu Teppei is the right answer. That's not what he's saying.
I don't think so. Not at that time, anyway.
Not at that time. But I'm just like, well, if he's saying that a villain who isn't a human isn't like a good, like they're not an antagonist, they're just a thing to be defeated.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's saying that like just punishing Teppei with the law and like getting Satoko away from him isn't the best resolution either. I'm just like, what, are you saying that Satoko should just be like, Teppei, you're not treating me well. This is making a hostile work environment.
Let's talk about your feelings.
I want to renegotiate my contract, Teppei.
I won't pick up the cans unless you tell me about your feelings. Come on, bro.
Okay, remind me if I'm wrong, but didn't, like, the whole reason Teppei became wholesome in Ghost Sotsu, wasn't it because he started getting memories from past
Yes,
lives?
he basically like starts seeing himself dying.
Started, like having dreams of just dying alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even really, it doesn't come off as if he felt bad for Satoko.
Yeah.
It comes off as if he was just like, I'm gonna die alone. I should
He like
fix my mistakes.
He even admits to her that like his motivation is somewhat selfish, but he's just like, listen, I realize the way I'm going right now, nobody likes me and nobody's gonna like me, so I better shape up.
Yeah.
I like how in my notes about Sotsu Teppei, one, I have it under do not let this breach containment and I failed. But two, I keep calling him Punished Teppei because I didn't understand the meme.
You kept calling him what?
Punished Teppei, which is a reference to like Metal Gear Solid 5, how they have like Punish Snake.
Oh.
A man denied something, I don't know. But I was like, well, from what I've seen of this meme, Punished Teppei is the name. And I just like that name.
Yeah, he just comes around with an eye patch.
Fit. It's not correct.
No, yeah. He hasn't been punished enough, frankly.
The man denied his lotteries.
But yeah, I think definitely Teppei sort of forms the building blocks that would become a better portrayal of this sort of thing in somebody like Rosa later on.
We have got another seance from a dead character. AD says the dreams about dying alone are like a Christmas miracle, basically, and they played it entirely seriously.
Yeah.
That is very true.
Teppei, the Witch of Miracles.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Visited by the witch of Christmas future.
Nightmare about Bird
His
Costello.
witch dress is just like a fanned out version of that Hawaiian shirt that he's always wearing.
I could 100% see like Burn Castell's first action after being separated from Rika is like, I'm gonna make this bastard pay.
Yeah.
It just starts like starts beaming eldritch horror nightmares into his brain.
This is the fragment where you have the worst night terrors.
Wait, what if that really did happen, but Bernd Castell's punishment was every night dreaming of Teppei every night dreaming of himself dying, and she unintentionally provoked Go by making Teppei dream about himself dying and wanting to be good to Satoko, and she made Teppei wholesome by mistake.
I think it would be very fitting for Burn
about
Castell to create Go to punish all of us.
Burn Castell at the end of Matsuri. Because I'm not quite sure what to make of it, because I understand that that Matsuribayashi is a world without losers. It's a world with no need for villains. Like,
I mean,
they put the card back in the deck of whatever game they were playing. That's the analogy they use.
But the story still acknowledges fucking hell, what's her name? Takano. The story still acknowledges Takano as having done something bad, and she is punished in the story for that. She does go to prison. It's just that the characters are like, hey, I get it. You're still going to prison, though.
Yeah.
But then,
like, you need to go to therapy,
but at the end of the story, like, goes back and like gives Miyako Tanashi like the choice of, do you want to die or not? And she chooses that she does, and so Mio Takano, as she exists, does not exist in that fragment.
Well, she says she does.
Because her parents didn't die, and she had like a happy.
She
life,
says she doesn't want to die.
Okay. I didn't remember it very well because I haven't gotten there in my reading of the.
Oh, I gotcha.
Because like I said, watched the anime like 3 years ago. I'm about to start the answer arcs in my VN read. But...
I think it's just like one of those like weird domino chain things where it's like, hey, I'm stepping in here. You don't want to get on that train that kills you.
But like Rika, Burn Castell, but Rika of all people, like gives Takano a happy ending.
At least
in that
least one fragment where she can be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about people who don't get any forgiveness, I mean the start of Matsuri Bayashi, like Takano's whole backstory, holy shit. Like I'd be happy to watch a fragment where like instead of doing everything she does, she just like hunts down those people and fucking tepees them.
Oh,
like,
please.
Takano revenge side story.
Like I'd love that. I mean, there's a lot of characters in Matsuri Bayashi that don't get any comeuppance at all. Like not just those people, but the actual political masterminds, shall we say, who like are manipulating Takano for the whole series. I suppose we don't see it until chapter 8, but nothing happens to them.
Was just to be the most important character in When They Cry. Like,
yeah,
your
true,
punishment is that you have to keep coming back.
Like. He was cursed with being this is full Umineko spoilers, right? I'm 99%.
Yeah.
He's just cursed with being a billionaire. Like
yeah, like
wait, Okonogi isn't a billionaire in Higurashi?
Not in Higurashi, but like
he becomes a billionaire by playing his
I
role.
guess it's 15 years later for the future.
AD, Okonogi's punishment is that they let him dress himself and he came out looking like a minor antagonist in a Yakuza game. Very true.
A random realization. I just realized the person who dies 15 years after Keiichi curses them by falling off a boat into the ocean dies in 1998. That's not important. It's just the year that Umineko
you almost give me a heart attack with that correlation until you said 1998, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
I was like, I thought about it, and then I'm like, no, not quite.
when does Keiichi curse someone to fall in the ocean?
He does it at the end of Tatari Goroshi.
Yeah, when he falls off the bridge.
When he like literally thinks he's a god.
It's not in the anime.
He's like, I used to have the ability to curse people. I can't hear those footsteps anymore. But if you do, you better watch out. And then he dies the next night. Like,
oh yeah, I think I remember that.
God, that whole like Keiichi's whole sort of like state in that episode. I don't want to like diverge from the topic. I just want to say that it's like really unintentionally hilarious to me. Everybody's giving him an out. They're like winking, like, you weren't at the festival, right? Or you were at the festival, right, Keiichi? You were with us. And he's like, what? There's a clone of me?
Wait, is that? I thought it was. Wait.
I was going to say,
Did I just not read Tatari Goroshi?
Yeah. Like after he kills Tepe, everybody's like, "Yeah, man, we're with you. That was totally cool of you to do. We're giving you an excuse." And he's like,
"Yeah,
what? There was another me. Fuck."
Oh my god, I never noticed this.
Like Rena and Rena and Mion are like, hey, let's go hang out at Mion's place, and like Keiichi's like, oh my god, they're gonna kidnap me. It's like
they're doing everything in their power to give him an alibi, and he's like, these people, I cannot trust them.
Base Ryukishi is like that. This is the actual good ending he was like hinting at. It's like,
that's what he was
you still
talking
kill
about.
Teppei, but you just nobody, like, you know, jury nullification. That's the answer. That is the answer to all child abuse.
Speaking of not being able to trust anybody, the Yoshiramiya family.
Yoshiramiya's.
Alright, is it time to jump aboard Umineko then?
Real quick, I do just want to bring up the juxtaposition in Onikakushi.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because, like, the first lines of the story, other than, like, the console edition that has, like,
The police
the
staff
murder
room,
scene at the front for some reason.
Oh yeah.
But, like, one of the first scenes in Onikakushi is, Keiichi, like, on the train to Hinamizawa, and there's someone, like, apologizing profusely.
Yeah.
Like, over and over and over again. He's like, just forgive them already. Can't you see they're clearly sorry? And then that's juxtaposed later with Rena, who may or may not be a hallucination, outside his window, apologizing profusely to him for hours. Like,
Yeah.
and because he's in that state of mind, you can it's like possibly a hint that he's just not in the correct state of mind, but it's interesting, like, how his thought process changes when he's paranoid.
80 says it's Hanyu, right? Apologizing to him for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah, Keiichi can't see Hanyu.
Not for what's about to happen, but for what has happened in the previous loop, which is what you see at the very start, before the train scene. Because it wouldn't make sense for it to be what's about to happen, because Hanyu cannot see the future. But she can see the past loop. And Keiichi probably suffered in the past loop, as he does in all loops. So
Wait, so does Keiichi see, like, the ending of not the ending, but, like, part
Not
of a past
Keiichi.
fragment at the very beginning of a story? Because Keiichi reacts to, like, the person on the train in his head. It could just be, like, unreliable narration, and, like, this scene doesn't happen, but...
No, it's because Keiichi went out of Hinamizawa, and that's how he started developing the syndrome. And then the stress, once he came back, didn't help, and that's what made him progress until he got to L5. He started going through the levels when he left Hinamizawa, so we see him in the train coming back to Hinamizawa, so he was already developing the syndrome, so he can already hear Hanyu apologizing.
Gotcha. That
Makes sense?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Alright, that's all I really wanted to talk about for Onikakushi.
Okay. Umineko time?
I think so.
Umineko time.
Alright, should we start with Rosa, since we just talked about Teppei?
Yeah, I think Rosa would be a good jumping on point.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just obviously, you know, maybe not obviously. I think it's Ryukishi, like, really regretting, you know, not exploring that side of the character more from Teppei. Like you can't really see like Rosa's death being a good ending for Maria, which I think is like the big difference there. Like I also think I don't have too much more to say really about Rosa, except Maria. Actually, I have more to say about Maria than Rosa. Maria forgives Rosa, but she has to do it over and over and over. Like, it's quite interesting that, you know, it's not shown as like the answer to the solution in this particular case. So the answer to the problem in this particular case, it's like it's actually shown as, like, it's in a lot of ways, like, you know, Maria's magic. It's shown as both, you know, a good and a bad thing. You know, it's a good thing for everyone except the person, you know, using the magic. Like, Maria just takes on everyone's punishment.
Not really. I think it's also good for Maria herself. It's just not a final solution, because it helps her cope with everything. The way she
Like, rationalizes it.
Yeah, the way she rationalizes it by, like, she actually is denying reality and putting a layer of fantasy over it, and it helps her get through a situation that she cannot change, because she's a child, you know. So there's nothing Maria can do about it. So in a way, it is good for her, even though it is like a messed up way of coping, she's in no position to cope in any other way. So it's best for her to cope this way than to not cope at all.
Yeah, true.
80
Although
added...
I think...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
This is gonna
interject.
do
80 first.
80s edition, yeah. It was Maria forgives Rosa by explaining her behavior away as not being her real mama. Which, yes, that is like her primary coping mechanism, which is, of course, what makes it so powerful at the end of episode 2 when, you know, Rosa starts talking about the Black Witch again, and Maria basically says that there's just one mama. She's known that the whole time.
I was gonna say, like, Maria's coping, you know, with magic and stuff. Like, I think it sets her up to fail as well. Like, she kind of forgets not forgets, but because of the way she copes, she acts as though it's not going to happen again. And she does things. She repeats things over and over because her way of resolving the issue is to explain it away. Like it's I think it's like very good writing and very like true to life about the way people cope with things that they really shouldn't ever have to cope with. But yeah, I mean, I guess coming back to forgiveness, I think it's interesting that, you know, the forgiveness is shown as something that is actually shackling her into the same loop, I suppose.
I think it's really interesting how Angie in EP4 kind of like idealizes the way, like, for a little bit, until we get like the whole flashback of Rosa like tearing apart Sakataro and everything like that. Kind of idealizes the way Maria's happiness exists, in that she can take in like all the suffering that Rosa gives her, and then I think they say something along the lines of like she purifies it and then turns it into something else with her magic of origins. And I think it's interesting how that's kind of treated as like a very good thing. And then you see Maria's grimoire at the end of EP4, where it's like, oh, like magic to make the school bus crash, like or something like that.
Yeah, it's
like,
become sort of
it's very clearly
skewed,
like hurting her, but it's viewed as a positive thing until Angie like just can't take it anymore. It's like, no, your mom's a terrible person.
Well,
I can't stand
to be
this.
fair, I think there is some delineation between this, like these two eras of magic, sort of, where that clear kind of cutoff point,
a line in the sand, like before Mariage Sorcière.
Yeah, but like
before Angie left.
The dissolution of Mariage Sorcière was definitely that sort of breaking point where everything in the grimoire became far less cheery.
I think that I don't remember where I first heard the quote, but I think Maria is very important in. This isn't necessarily forgiveness, but it has a part in it, in the cycle of abuse, of how you see how what Rose was doing to Maria very, very much could have turned her into a like a mirror of Rosa in the future if she went down the wrong path. And that leads into I seriously wish I knew where this quote came from. The idea that I always associate with Umineko is hurt people hurt people. Like, and that
if you're hurting someone, you're just priming them to hurt someone instead. Like, next, I mean. You're like hurting people indirectly by hurting someone directly. That kind of idea? Okay, yeah.
But also that, like, like, the way that Angie forgives Ava in that episode is kind of by understanding that they have the same pain of losing their entire family. And that part of the reason that Ava was so cold and closed off to her, at least what she realizes in that EP, is because they failed to connect over that shared pain and just kept hating each other over it. And so it's not like Ava was always this way.
Right.
Like, they both went through the same pain and they both became jaded in the same way.
Yeah.
Instead of connecting over
Actually, are we able to bring up the side content for Umineko as well?
Fine for me.
What kind of side content?
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Witch's Tanabata.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring that up. It's in the manga too, I think, but it's a side story.
But yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but in The Witches Tanabata, it's like it kind of explains how Eva's relationship with Angie started going sour, and it's all because from an external influence, Angie learned of all the theories about how Eva could have been the one murdering everyone. So Angie started
kind of like
not
poisoned the well. I just think it's kind of interesting as a sort of glimpse into the starting point of their relationship, because in episode 4 and even at the end of episode 3, we don't really get that much context directly for how Eva was treating her at the beginning of their relationship. We just know that like Anjay was like, I don't want to fucking deal with her. But then when we actually get to see it, it's like we see that Eva does start off like pretty sweet. She's like, I want to be like a new mother to you. I want to help you. But of course, obviously, it did not pan out that way.
Yeah, and then Eva just calls her a killer.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty fitting for like the fantasy perspective of the Witches Tanabata to be that it is Bern who gives Angie this cursed gift of the knowledge that Eva might have been the one to kill her parents. It's very fitting for Bern to be the one to tell Angie that, because as we brought up on yesterday's episode, Bern is representative of the witch hunters and all the forgeries being not written but read at the time, just like the goats are, because the goats and Bern, both of them are like reading the story purely for like entertainment purposes. They don't care that this is a story about real people with real life repercussions. They're just there for the funny tricks and logic puzzles. They're not really there for the heart of the story. And so Bern being like Angie starting to be jaded towards Eva because she learns of these theories through Bern could be a metaphor for Angie learning about all the theories that exist online. Many of them that place Eva as the murderer.
Or at least on the news at the time, for sure.
Or on the news, yeah.
And I definitely agree with that, simply because also, lest we forget that Bern's avatar on the board that she uses to puppet around is Erica, of course, who is like the embodiment of like, Santa Claus isn't real, I can prove it, you know?
Destroying children's dreams, yes, that is Furude Erika.
Yeah.
And Bern.
Well, like we talked about yesterday, like Erica was probably just like a person who died, and like Bern took that person and just like crafted it into what she needed. Like, it kind of reads like something the internet would do, like the witch hunters would do. That was like,
just taking any sort of like tangential detail related to the case and being like, oh, what if this was, you know?
Yeah.
What if
like
this coincidence was related?
It's the kind of thing you can do because it's a cat box, but like, you know, your scientists were too preoccupied with whether they could. They didn't think. They didn't stop to think whether they should.
But I guess to get back on Rosa for a second, I think just in general the way that she is portrayed is very interesting in the way that she is constantly balanced between, like, you can see her better moments, you can see her more pathetic moments, and then like right after they just like hit you with the worst behavior you've ever seen. I think particularly a really good example of this is in episode 2 when she's talking about like having the servants go out because she's suspicious of them. And she kind of acts apologetically. She's like, you know, I wanna apologize to you for this tomorrow when everything's cleared up. You know, I feel really bad about this. And Battler kind of starts to come down. He's like, okay, well, you know, at least she, you know, she's like being a person about it. Like, she feels sorry for them. And then as soon as they close the door, she's like, God, what idiots.
Yeah, I'm also not sure what point I want to make with this, but I was kind of thinking of the scene when Sakutaro dies and thinking about how, like, wow, that sure is an impactful scene. The beheading of a plushie in this VN about people dying left and right. We get desensitized to the Twilight murders throughout the story, but then Sakutaro dies and we're like, what the fuck, Rosa, what the fuck?
I think
just a thing and kill.
I think one of the things that's so important about that whole sequence, and of course what follows after with the whole like Maria killing Rosa over and over again in her brain, is that, you know, obviously we've seen all of these things from Rosa. We're primed to believe that, like, I mean, hey, you know, if anybody deserves to be punished, it's probably Rosa. But it still feels wrong. Not because we don't think that Rosa should be punished for what she's done, because Christ almighty, what she's done. But it's just the wrong solution for Maria in terms of her emotional state, because it's like, this still is her mother. It doesn't mean that she has to forgive her necessarily, quote unquote, but at the same time, like, filling herself with sort of like this irreparable kind of hatred, the way it's described as like these sort of ghostly hands reaching up behind her that are her own hands clawing into her. I guess it's just kind of describing the way that pain eats at her, and the way that, like, you know, the fact that she's been pushed to this point is sort of the tragedy of the situation. Like, she should have never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if that was happening with Satoko and Tepe? Like, if Satoko was having, like, visions of, like, killing Tepe over and over, like, we'd cheer for that, I think. You know, because it would probably mean that she's going to go and do something about it, which is, like, I guess more in line with what Higurashi's, you know, general vibe is with this theme.
Satoko would definitely kill Tepe.
Yeah.
So, like, she has already killed people before, for that matter. So
yeah.
Satoko is already a killer. What's one more
abuse? Not
Satoko highest body count by the end of Higurashi.
I mean, I think before that point, the only people she's killed are her parents, right? And she doesn't even realize that necessarily. Like,
yeah, she's like having an L5 freak out, and she pushes them off the.
No. She knows she killed her parents, because in that same conversation she has with Keiichi before everyone goes confront Rena in the dumping site in Tatari Goroshi, Satoko does tell Keiichi, hey, you don't need to tell everything to your friends. You should reach out to them, but everyone has things that maybe they don't want to talk about.
Wink, wink, and nudge.
When Keiichi's going through his, like, mental breakdown of, holy shit, I used to shoot people with BB guns. And Satoko is like, hey, it's in the past. You've changed.
Don't worry about it. I killed my parents.
People in the past. Yeah, I killed my parents. It's in the past. It's fine, Keiichi.
I don't know if that's necessarily what she's trying to say, but yeah, I can see it.
I think she might be talking about how she didn't, like, share the things that Tepe and and her aunt were doing to her and Satoshi before could be part of it, because she is the character who doesn't tell her friends stuff.
Yeah, and I think just in general, I mean, like, you know, obviously we're cutting up, but, like, I think she's just generally trying to impart a sort of a moral to him. Like, hey, you know, that's how friendship is. You don't always have to tell your friends everything. They can still be your friends.
I have some things I want to say about a different character.
Which character?
Oh boy. We kind of touched on this yesterday as well, but Genji.
Okay.
And Kinzo and Sayo. Well, yeah. I'm talking about one very particular apology that did not help anybody except someone who didn't deserve it. Fuck you, Kinzo. Yes. Like, just leave it alone.
Yep.
Fuck you, Genji. Just leave it alone. That didn't help anybody. Don't... Yeah.
In case you're not sure what we're talking about, it's after Genji gave Sayo the hint to find the gold, and then Sayo did find the gold, and then Genji was like, alright, I will introduce the new golden witch to this person who has fucking destroyed the lives of the two previous golden witches. Yes, it's a good idea to present him the third.
This is generally, like, this whole section is, like, I don't think it's badly written or anything, but when talking about the way Ryukishi writes forgiveness, this is, like, the one instance in which I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to fully go with you on this one. Because
I think that's
kind of
intended.
frames it as, like, you know... Now, to his credit, Kinzo is, like, somewhat self-aware. He does say, like, no, I'm gonna go to hell for this. There's no fixing this. Everybody, just be aware of that. And I'm like, yeah, man, I know. But there is still like that sort of like when Genji is like, I believe that in his final moments he's been redeemed. I'm like, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
That's a hot take, Genji.
Genji, would you like to explain your thought process behind this a little bit?
Genji, would you share with the class why Kinzo is redeemed?
I mean, like, just because, at the end he was like, oh man, what I did was real bad. Yeah, it sure was. It might have helped if he'd realized that before.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I think this is a well-written scene. I think it's intended for you to, like, not feel good about this. I mean, it's it's written that way. It's written from Sayo's perspective. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I was going to say.
You're
like,
all cut now.
It's good writing. It's bad character actions, which doesn't equal bad writing.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess what I was going to say kind of plays into that too. Yeah, because it's like I was going to sort of elaborate and say like, yeah, the thing that I also think kind of plays into that, though, is, of course, it's framed as this sort of, like, I guess not redemptive, but it's a cathartic moment for Kinzo. It's, like, his sort of culmination in terms of, like, his own personal feelings and, like, his life and all that stuff. And I think what we're sort of supposed to gather from that, I think, is sort of, like, the inverse of the catharsis of forgiveness in a situation like this, where like Sayo comes to the realization that all of this has been built up so that Kinzo can feel better about the situation. And then once this all happens, all it does for Sayo is like make things immeasurably worse. Like knowing this information could not have helped Sayo in any way. And once that has been sort of put out in the open, it's like, oh, okay, well, great. You engineered this whole situation so this terrible old man could feel better about himself. What do I get out of it? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And of course, if we're talking about Genji, I also want to bring up the manga scene where Sayo is kind of like, hey, Genji, would you like go along with me with everything I do? And Genji's like, yeah, I'll serve the head of the family in everything. And then Sayo's like, even if I kill everybody, like if I just go sicko mode crazy and like murder every single person and then myself, and he's like, even then, ride or die, I'm with you to the end. Which, like, on one hand, I feel like, I understand where he's coming from. He's like, I've failed this child in so many ways. Like, the least I can do is just, like, ride it out to the bitter end. But at the same time, it's like, Genji, the better solution would be to, like, I don't know, do the right thing that would lead to this child's happiness instead. Even if it is against what Sayo wants. Like, you should be like, no, we can't murder people. Like, that's not going to help you. So that's another area in which I think Genji sort of failed his task. Failed task successfully, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's all I had to say about Genji.
And the character I always think about when I think about forgiveness in Umineko is obviously Angie, because that's her whole arc.
Yep.
Learning to forgive. But I don't know if I can, expand on it any more than Umineko already has. Because it's like 200 hours of explaining Angie's journey through forgiveness. I don't know if any of you wants to add anything to Umineko. I don't feel like I can, personally. I just wanted to point out that Angie is the forgiveness character.
I think an equal part of her character journey, too, is... like, because, she acknowledges all of the things that have happened and, like, all of the experiences that sort of got everybody to the point where they were at. Especially even with, like, the additional dialogue in episode 8's manga where Rudolph and Kyrie kind of apologize for not being parents that she could be proud of. So I think an equally important part of that is that, she kind of sees where her family is coming from and forgives them, but also at the same time, she doesn't, like, not acknowledge the bad parts of them. It's just that she is able to also recognize the memories and love that she shares with them, and not let them be degraded by sort of, people coming in after the fact and speculating for their own purposes. Because, if Rosa is anything to go by, we know that there are like simultaneous versions of a person that sort of, when I say versions of a person, I just mean that like a person can be very kind at some times and very awful at other times. They are the same person though. These states exist simultaneously. So I guess in that sense, a big part of the character journey for Angie is sort of just realizing that, like, yeah, even if my family members did these terrible things or were these terrible people at certain moments, that doesn't mean that the love they felt for me or the happy times that we shared together were any less real.
Yeah. I think you said it all. That's a good summary.
I guess when you think about it, like, Battler and Angie are the two characters in Umineko that actually have themes of forgiveness, and all the other characters like have themes of apology.
Yeah,
not quite, because there are
Maria is also a forgiver.
I get that. Yeah, but yeah, I get
actually. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, since I brought him up, we should probably talk about Battler. But if you have something to say about Angie first.
Oh, no, I was just gonna, we can save this for after Battler. I was just gonna say, in terms of characters that fit this subject especially, Ava is one that's definitely a big one for me.
Well, you said Butler was a forgiver, but isn't he?
They are the forgivers,
more of an
and the others
apologizer because of the promise he did not keep.
So
his sin.
It's interesting, like, I think a lot of people will agree, like, Battler's sin is, like, on an absolute scale, like, if we're comparing it in terms of, like, a judge handing down a sentence, like, I'd probably let Battler off with a warning for that. It's very understandable that, he made a promise that meant more to the person he promised to than it did to him. Compared to, like, everything from murder to fraud being committed around in the background of his promise. I think it's interesting that the Umineko does zero in very hard on Battler's sin, and I think the reason for that is because of the perspective that the story is being told from, because Battler did survive. So of course, if you're writing this and you had some hand in the thing that caused all this, you're going to dwell more on that than you are on, oh, I guess some of these people I loved were kind of shitty and they did all these shitty things. You're probably going to want to be like Angie and like just kind of let that go, because it doesn't help you. Not that Battler dwelling on his own sin is going to help him, but I think it's understandable.
Right. Yeah, it's more understandable just because he feels like that's like the one thing that he could have done differently to help. But in that sense too, to bring it back to the scale of his sin for a second, I agree that it's just like, obviously in the grand scheme of things, it's quite small. It's just, it's that one like tipping domino that sort of tipped over all of the other little things that sort of cascaded into Sayo learning the truth about Kinzo and everything. And that's just, that's where it all went south.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I should say, as well as meaning a lot to Battler, it does mean a lot to Sayo. Like, it's not a smaller domino from Sayo's perspective. It was just, it was just one of many that were all about the same size. So,
because Sayo even says in episode 7 through Claire that, like, if Battler hadn't come back, then, like, it still would have been very painful, but it would have been endurable.
Because if I remember correctly, Sayo was going through shit, but she wasn't unstable before Butler's arrival, because what Butler's arrival did was, well, destabilize her, because she was gonna be with George, and she was and George, as bad of a person as he might be, he was gonna help her go through all the hardship the family was gonna throw at her, and he was gonna go through with her through that, so she would have an escape from this island. The only thing she would have to deal with would be the fact that George still doesn't know everything about Sayo, and she would have to somehow explain that to him and hope that he would understand. But she would have been somewhat stable. But then Butler comes in, and she suddenly finds herself trapped between all of these different choices that she can make, and she doesn't know what she should do.
That, and of course, you know, she talks too about how Battler coming back also throws a wrench into things, because there's that little tiny hope that he'll remember everything that they promised each other, and then he doesn't. And that's what, like, really seals the deal.
Yeah, because she saw Butler as an escape, not because he proved himself to be an escape, but because in these past 6 years that she's been overthinking about things, Butler has become this concept of an escape. And suddenly that escape appears, and she's like, fuck, what now?
Yeah.
Also, I think, this isn't really related to forgiveness, but about Battler being an escape to her, there's the note that, like, Battler and Sayo got along 6 years ago for who they were, and then you have the line in EP3 about George being like, oh, I didn't even know you liked mystery novels, which just is just, how much do you really know about Sayo, George?
Yeah.
Sir, you should probably know a little bit more about the person you're engaged to.
About the person you're proposing to tonight.
Yeah.
Like, I am aware that Ryukishi has, like, done an interview or something. I'm vaguely aware of this, where he said that, like, he reckons George would probably accept her for who she is. But
I remember
like,
this.
he kind of already does that because he doesn't know anything about her.
He
like-
just goes in blind.
I just, like, you know, like, yeah. And also I think.
I feel like...
Oh, go ahead, Des.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like George would still have some trouble accepting it, because he is living in the 80s and in Japan. I do believe he would ultimately accept Sayo, but it isn't as simple as maybe that line from Ryukishi is making it seem, because considering the culture, it would still be hard for him, I believe. But I honestly do have to agree that George does sound like the kind of guy who would accept Sayo.
I just don't know if...
For all his flaws, I think he would.
Because Sayo's whole thing is that she wants someone to accept her, she wants someone to acknowledge her. But then in the, like, both with George and in the magic ending, you can see that she's kind of, like, not ready to go through the hardship that comes with someone accepting her, in that sense. She can't atone for her sins. She doesn't want to risk George rejecting her. So...
Because if she was a George, then what's she gonna have?
Yeah.
It's too hard of a choice to make.
I mean, also there are some obstacles in the way. Like, I don't think they're ever going to get married. Sorry, George, but she is your aunt.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Yeah. I don't know.
They could still get married. Aren't there?
Well,
like,
I don't think it's
non-
legal.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay,
I think because I think
the laws work in
I think in
Japan.
the confession chapters, Sayo mentions something about, like, at least between, like, cousins like that, it's not legal for them to.
They don't have to know their cousins.
Yeah.
There's no
I
record
mean-
of Sayo's birth, at least legally speaking. Like, I don't
True,
think
that
so
is
anyway.
also true. But
So,
like,
it is
but
a
yeah,
problem, but I don't think the problem is legal.
right. Well, I mean, obviously, the problem doesn't have to be legal. There is definitely a problem.
There are a lot of problems, okay?
But yeah, legality is, I guess, kind of low on that list, really.
Yeah. About forgiveness towards Sayo, though, I see a lot of people who are just like, I can't comprehend why Battler is just like, don't worry, Beatrice, I understand, I forgive you. Like,
Oh, true.
I don't, like,
True,
I
we haven't talked about
understand, but there's a lot of people who apparently don't. Like, they
Yeah.
just don't really get it. It's like, how can you forgive this person that killed your family over and over again?
Yeah. Well, first of all, they just went through 200 plus hours of Meta World shenanigans, and this person has literally built a game specifically for you. Like, how romantic is that?
How romantic. He killed my family no less
Second
than
of
80
all-
times.
And even though it is a traumatic experience for Butler, in a vacuum, you can say Beato has killed for him.
Yeah.
That is also very romantic. And also, Butler is a very empathetic person. So,
I think fundamentally, too, it's just like, it's not that Battler necessarily excuses all of those things, but also at his core, the Battler that gets what happened when he does finally understands the pain that he personally has put Sayo through, whether intentionally or otherwise, obviously. And he knows, too, that, like, the murders haven't actually, like, happened, quote unquote. Not that they're, like, obviously he takes issue with the way it's presented and the way it's, like, sort of dwelled in this sort of, like, glee. He takes very much umbrage with that. He makes very clear in episode 3. But in a sense, he also understands, like, where Sayo is coming from. And, so to that extent, he sees her, I guess, as sort of like this very pitiable figure in this situation where it's like, all of this pain that you went through is partly my fault. So, like, from what grounds can I judge you when I'm, like, partly the reason that you've suffered anyway?
yeah, and also, if we're taking Rokkenjima Prime to be the EP7 stuff to be Rokkenjima Prime, maybe Sayo was prepared to kill, but Sayo didn't
Right.
kill in Rokkenjima Prime.
He even
so that makes it easier.
he even says that in those
It's no
sort of
different
like
from
little in the little extra bit of that scene that we get in the episode 8 manga. He's like, I'm not really sure I understand the whole situation, but you're saying that you were prepared to kill me. Well, okay, I think I get it. He's like, but you didn't. So, what does it matter at this point?
Because, like, if we look at it from a meta level, it would be a lot harder to forgive, like, Beatrice, the meta level Beatrice, from Battler's perspective, but that doesn't matter to Battler and Sayo. Like, because in the meta level, all of these stories, all of these tales, all of these fragments are real worlds that really happened, but to the characters on Rokkenjima Prime.
But even for Meta Butler, I think it's by EP3, he already starts to get desensitized to the murders happening on the game board. So even in a meta layer, Meta Butler and Beatrice also makes sense as a couple, and for Butler to forgive Beato, because he himself becoming a meta character, he gets it, like, we're not on the same layer as these people on the game board right now.
Yeah, he sort of starts to become a little bit more aware of his role in that sense. By the time we get to sort of like the extra material later on, which is a bit more superfluous to the main story, when they start playing games, he's just like, oh yeah, what's going to happen this time? Rubs my hands together. Let's solve the mystery. Like, at that point, he doesn't even care.
Not to talk about EP9, but... in EP9.
Okay, talking about forgiveness in EP9, when will Ryukishi apologize? When will Ryukishi apologize?
When will you apologize for what you've done?
Peace for everyone, peace.
Peace. No, about him being
can I just
desensitized to the
say...
murders, though. You can go.
Sorry, can I just say I haven't read EP9, so if there are going to be spoilers...
I won't spoil it.
Yeah.
I'll deafen myself and you can... Yeah.
In that there is a line where they say, where I think it's Beato who's thinking this. That's like, if you targeted people specifically just to like cause Battler pain, at like these things that are happening in this game, then I won't forgive you. Like, which kind of makes me think he's not fully desensitized to it, but he does understand there's a separation. Like, his family still like exists as pieces on the game board. Like, even if they die in this game, they're not dead.
It's not like he doesn't care. It's just that he doesn't have as much of an adverse reaction as he does at the start of the story.
Right.
And also, the situation in EP9 is very personal to him.
Yeah.
Not to get into spoilers, but we've seen how he's reacted the last time something regarding that issue has come up.
So it's one of those things where it's like you
know
that, you know that it's going to affect him. I think that's sort of what Beato is getting at too. It's just kind of like, you know, to a certain extent he can detach himself in the sense that he's playing a game, but it is still his family at the end of the day. So like if you're doing something to intentionally trip him up and like hurt his feelings, then like that's screwed up.
Yeah.
It's like if you were playing Clue, but instead of using fictional names, you use the names of the people playing with you. But then someone stands up and says, I fucked your mom last night. Like, unironically. We're playing a game.
And it happened twice.
EP9 is funny. You should read it, Horsefry.
I
intend
a real
to.
story that was written by Ryukishi07.
Apparently.
Yeah. I think large parts of it have already been spoiled for me. Like, people don't seem to consider it. Like, they just seem to consider it part of the first 8 EPs. So I'm pretty sure the main twist of that has been already spoiled to me, but I still want to read it.
Well, you don't have to feel bad for that, because the main twist of it is very fucking obvious, and that's one of the reasons why people don't like EP9, is because EP9 plays it off like it is such a hard mystery when you figure out what the twist is in like the first 5 minutes of the episode, and it's like a 5-hour episode.
I actually, like this year, I read all of Umineko with my mother. And when we got to EP9, she figured it out within like the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, because Umineko battle hardens you for these kinds of things, and then you get to EP9, and it's like the story is like belittling you. It's like the story thinks you're still in the answer arcs, and you don't understand how meta shenanigans work.
I mean, to be fair, we know like there was a strong response to EP8 even. Like, Ryukishi has been burned, like, you know, twice burned, thrice shy on making things vague.
Well, in this case, it isn't making it vague. It's just you'll figure out when you read it.
Yeah.
It's only like 2.5 hours. Go read it.
Yeah, it's not very long at all.
Yeah.
To sort of bring things back a little bit, I did want to talk about Ava a little bit, just because I think she is such a central character when it comes to this sort of theming, especially in episode 4, and then follow-ups to some of these things in episode 8. Because, well, I mean, in general, the scene with her and Kasumi in episode 4 is like the big, like, what is forgiveness kind of moment in Umineko, I think. If you had to like pick one above all else. Because it sort of frames the situation in which, you know, abuse and people hurting each other comes from, where even with the little that we know about Kasumi, we see it framed through the way that Ava Beatrice talks to her, and sort of like embodies that idea of the Black Witch, of the dark magic that speaks to you, that tells you that the only way to escape your pain is by shoving it onto somebody else.
Okay, that's interesting. You just reminded me of something. There are exactly 3 people actually. But well, 2 of the people who are tied to the expression Black Witch are Kasumi and Rosa. I think Eva is also tied to that expression at some point.
Eva's used to like represent
both Kasumi,
but, like, as the,
because I'm thinking of that scene with Kasumi, and she's like torturing Angie as a way of like, she's basically making Angie obtain, like, ask for forgiveness. She's like, the forgiveness happening in that scene with Angie and Kasumi, like they are what the person being apologized to wants. So it's like she's demanding an apology, and then you think about Rosa, who is the other Black Witch, and whenever she apologizes to Maria, it's for the sake of the person apologizing, not the person being apologized to. So they're like on the opposite sides of the spectrum of who is this apology for.
Uh-huh.
And in the middle of your point, I just realized both of them are referred to as the Black Witch.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way they sort of frame that as sort of the vehicle for how those feelings sort of escape a person. I think, obviously, you know, that part in the scene where Angie sort of comments to herself, like, well, now I understand, you know, I wasn't looking at Aunt Ava as a person this whole time, but now I'm starting to recognize the person that is underneath the witch.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that in particular is just a really powerful way that they illustrate that, because again, it sort of emphasizes not that, like, you know, you don't have to forgive the person for everything that they've ever done, but at the same time, you can understand the human side of them that is suffering. You can understand where that pain comes from and how it manifests.
Yeah. Even Kasumi, who is being a horrible person, you can understand why she's doing this.
Mm-hmm. Like, even as Angie sort of, like, quote unquote kills her, which, you know, we don't have to get into the meta implications of what exactly is going on in that scene, but even then,
I love that scene because of how well I think that's the one scene in Umineko that has the best real world to fantasy narrative correlation. It fits together so well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, even in that scene, though, she's talking about how, like, you know, that Kasumi is really pitiable and that she feels sorry that this is how things had to happen between them.
Mm-hmm.
And on the note of Ava, I thought that it was interesting the way they sort of recontextualize previous behavior from her in a way that makes it possible for you to see her in a better light if you want to. Like, you know, without love it cannot be seen, and so on. With sort of the fact that Ava refuses to tell Angie what happened on her deathbed. And at first you can intuit that as like, oh, well, she's just being bitter. She's just being like, haha, screw you. Go to hell and find out for all I care. But then later when you find out, you know, what is implied to have happened on Prime in episode 7 and the way that affects Angie moving forward, there is now that implication that, like, well, of course Ava didn't tell her. Like, she's not going to tell her that when she knows that it would, like, absolutely destroy her. Mm-hmm. So she's sort of content in that scenario when their relationship is pretty much completely broken down and there's no salvaging it. She's like, well, I mean, you know, I can continue to be the bad guy here, and it will at least spare her feelings of having to know what happened.
Well, I think by the time Eva was in her deathbed, the reason she didn't tell Angie the truth wasn't because she knew it would hurt her. It was, I mean, Eva herself says this in that introductory scene. She says she isn't gonna tell Angie the truth because she believes not knowing the truth is a better torture than knowing the truth.
And I think there is some truth to when she says that as well. I think those two feelings sort of simultaneously exist. It is just that, you know, Ava is extremely bitter at this point, so I think that is the one that she vocalizes more, and I think she does believe it. But I do think that other motive also exists somewhere in there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I also think, hypothetically speaking, if Ava still did have some space in her heart left for Angie on her deathbed, which I don't know, it would probably hurt Angie more, like not to know the truth specifically, but to be like, I wish it didn't be this way. Keel's over, like,
yeah,
because then it's just like, oh wow, oh that's a lot to process.
Yeah, I think if Ava wanted to be extra cruel, there were some other things that she probably could have done to make things even worse.
Then there's the Erica line of a villain really must wear this face until the end.
Till the end.
Which applies to Ava here. Like...
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also want to bring up, speaking of episode 8, there's the line where Ava is talking to Kyrie and Rudolph off to the side while Angie sleeps. Or it's, well, in the manga, I think it's when she's sleeping. In the VN, I think it's when she's just, like, running off to talk to one of the other relatives or something. But when she says, you know, Anji, I just want you to know you may hate your auntie, but she doesn't hate you.
I don't know. I still think that may have been true at some point, but not at the end of EP3 when we see Eva in her deathbed.
I think
It's
think
definitely
EP8
complicated.
It's definitely
Yeah.
the truth is in the eye of the beholder there.
I think EP8 is definitely framed in terms of, these people are already dead. This is how you should remember them, Angie.
Right.
Like, as opposed to being a universal. It's not like they say it in Red that that Eva always loved you. It was more like, try to remember that she did at least at one point, and we're pretty sure that that's true. That at some point she did.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of largely what Angie is supposed to take away from it as well, is like, again, whether these people always felt one way or another, or whether they were always good or always bad, like, the memories that you have of them are still important, like they still matter to you. And obviously, like that's what's most constructively going to help her moving forward, because, focusing on what sucks probably isn't going to do much for her at this point.
Yeah.
That's what she's done her whole life.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's not worked for her.
But I also, and I'm not going to get too deeply into it, obviously, because it's like kind of personal details, so it's not my place to talk about that sort of thing. But I did mention earlier that I read all of Umineko this year with my mom, and episode 4 in particular, that scene with Kasumi and Eva Beato was like, I think I saw sort of the effects of like how this kind of story beat and how this particular view of forgiveness really affects a person in real life, because like I'm so wrapped up in like all the when they cry stuff that like I'm like 7 billion layers deep on all the meta narrative and all that stuff. So it's interesting to see it from the perspective of somebody coming into it who really has like no precedent for any of that, because what happened when we were reading that scene is that my mom actually like became overwhelmed with emotion and like started telling me about stuff related to her family life that like she had never told me before. And I think that really illustrates kind of like how it gets to the core of what those messages mean, because she was talking about, things that like she had difficulty forgiving her family members for, but then at the same time being able to remember that like they are still people and she wouldn't like want anything bad to happen to them. It's just, it's just kind of very interesting to me how like, it is just a story at the end of the day, but it still gets to the meat of how people really feel about things like that and how complicated it can be.
But I mean, how was the rest of the experience? Did your mother like reading it?
Oh yeah, she really liked it. She did tell me at the very end of it, like when we finished, she was like, well, it was really good. I'm still really sad. I think I'm probably gonna cry a little at work. And then she was like, and next time we read something together, you have to promise that it's gonna be something way happier than this.
Yeah. I mean, who was her favorite character?
It was, ironically enough, like for the majority of it, it was Kyrie. And I was wondering, like, if she was going to feel the same way when that other shoe dropped. And she was, like, really disappointed, but she was like, I mean, by this point, I think I'm primed to, like, understand that these people are complicated and that I should, so she's like, I still like Kyrie.
Oh, that's interesting.
That makes sense, I think.
That would have made a really interesting Let's Play.
Yeah.
If my mom can forgive Kyrie, you can forgive anybody. That's not the moral of today's episode.
I do have a personal experience with like the themes of forgiveness in EP4 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
Like that has helped me like forgive someone in my life. So I think it's really important to talk about like how these themes like do and don't reflect how that actually is sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I think that's...
Well, since we're talking about real life circumstances, well, my real life tie with Umineko would be Erika's backstory, but from the other side. from the other perspective. And I gotta say, really well portrayed Ryukishi. That is how someone in that situation feels.
Yeah. Erika is a really interesting case, actually, in that sense that, like, I think there are definitely things there where it makes her a sort of pitiable person and you can understand where she's coming from. But at the same time, she doesn't really give you any sort of leeway to, like, she doesn't seem like she wants to be forgiven for any of the things that she's doing. And I think that's where we kind of rub up against like what it means to forgive somebody, or if somebody is forgivable. Like, if they feel an actual responsibility for what they've done and sort of express that in such a way that, like, you can understand where they're coming from, that's one thing. With Erika, she does not want, like, anybody's forgiveness or pity. She is here to be awful, and she's going to continue to be awful.
It's really...
But I don't think Erika wants to be forgiven. First of all, because she doesn't feel she has done anything wrong. At most, she wants to be apologized to, but at the same time, she would not take the apology anyway. So, I feel like it's just like what's pitiable about that isn't Erika, but rather the fact that these situations do exist, and it's it just doesn't work well for anybody in the situation. Not for the person who should be apologized for, and not to the person who should be apologizing. It's just, it's the situation itself, man. It's not the people in them.
And I think, you know, that plays well into the scene that she has with Lambda. Is it either in, like, episode 5 or 6?
Which scene?
Where Lambda is talking about how, you know, the best way to create the meanest bully is to put somebody through, like, excruciating bullying for a little bit and then give them power.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Erika is being put through. Like, she's basically being put through all of these terrible things, and then she's given the same control and, like, power over others to wield the truth that she envied from other people, and, like, or, you know, in the ways that she was, like, sort of neglected and hurt by that from other people. Now that she has the ability to wield that over others, she is going to use it to its fullest extent.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting how Erika doesn't really seem apologetic for anything, ever. Why would she be? But she...
Because I think it would break her a little, too, to admit she has been wrong about something. Because her pride is such an integral part of her character.
Yeah, there's literally that part where, like, she has to admit that one of her deductions was wrong, and she starts, like, screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or when Butler fucking one-ups her in the study conversation in EP5, and she's just screaming, just simply because Butler has found a leeway out of her theory. She just starts screaming. She has an actual identity crisis right there.
Yeah, which I feel like Furude Erika, like, the piece, maybe not the real person that existed, kind of, like, feels more responsibility to whatever role she's in the story, because she acts, air quotes, acts like a protagonist in EP5. She isn't, but she acts like the detective. She acts as if she's the main character. She is the main character. She is a detective.
She is the main character in EP5.
That's true. But then in EP6, like I said earlier, she refers to herself as a villain because she is not the detective. She accepts that she has, like, what she is doing is the evil thing in the story, and she kind of relishes in it a little bit. But... Yeah,
she accepts that that's her function in the narrative, and so she's like, well, I mean, you know, if you're telling me to be the villain, then I might as well be the villain, right?
Yeah. Erika's kind of, like, more of an actor than, like, as a piece than most of the other pieces. Because most other pieces play one role, and it is the character that they are.
Yeah,
but Erika
we've talked about.
Detective.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say we've talked about, like Des mentioned, how, you know, and I've talked about in the last episode, was how I think Byrne and the goats, and also I include Erika, like, they have a lot that is metaphorical, or maybe even stronger than that. For, like, the internet and the way it treated the Ushiromiya family and the Ropponjima massacre. And when you think of it from that perspective, like, I tend to think it's quite fitting that Erika and Burn are, like, there's just no apology whatsoever, like, completely unapologetically villains, because as far as they're concerned, like, they're just basically playing with toys here. And, like, it is really shitty to write fanfics about people who died, but it's kind of true to life in terms of the way people act in these situations. Like, yeah, like, they're just kind of fucking with real people, but they don't see it that way. It's kind of just the way the internet and the way celebrity / famous people work is, you know, they kind of just treat them as, you know, entitled to their tragedy.
Mm-hmm. I think that actually ties into the theming of forgiveness very well, because from the perspective of, like, the audience who is sort of being, well, you know, the outside world, the people who are sort of speculating about the family's tragedy after the fact, they're not looking at it from the perspective of, like, you know, these are people that I need to understand their motives and where they're coming from. These are just, like, you know, these are little play pieces that I play around with the aspects of and try to challenge myself to think of how this could have factored into this or whatever. So it's not like, you know, at no point do they really consider, you know, the internal humanity of these people and, like, what they may have regretted, or, like, you know, how Rosa knew that she was a terrible mother, or how Ava might have regretted some of the ways that she interacted with her family, or how Kraus regretted the way that he treated Ava whenever they were younger. That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. All they're focused on is, like, well, I mean, you know, Ava's kind of a, like, terrible person. I bet she would do this. Or Rosa's a child abuser, so I bet she would definitely do this. Like, you know, it's just extrapolating upon information with no sort of, like, framing or sympathy for the people that exist within those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a very similar fixation on the red truth compared to, like, the way they're only going to look at things that they know for a fact. So, like,
right.
They're never going to accept, you know, Toya writing an episode where, you know, everybody's happy and, like, the Halloween party. Like, they're never going to accept that, because none of that is backed up by the red. But you can't really back that stuff up with the red. It's just his memories. It's his he's trying to write, you know, that things were good at some times, and like, you know, those people can't accept that.
And that's where the sort of like hard logic part of it comes into it, where it's like, you know, well, you can't prove it, so it must not be real. It's like, it's the way that Erika says, you know, when somebody says that they love you, you know, like, what is that? It doesn't mean anything. You can't prove it. But that's sort of like fundamentally, I think, where they're saying, you know, these people's perspective is wrong, where it's like, you know, just because you can't prove it, just because it's not a factual thing that you can speak and, like, know that it is true without a doubt, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any meaning. And in the same way, you know, when somebody is apologetic for something, you can't prove that they feel sorry for it, but it, like, you know, it doesn't really matter.
We should start calling the plain text the white truth. It's the final chromatic truth.
I think it's really interesting how EP 2 through 4, like AP 2 through 5, kind of like builds you up with characters saying, like, only the red text is the only thing you can trust. I won't trust anything that's in white. No other letters matter. And of course, it's impossible to solve the mystery like that. You can't just look. It's impossible to solve the mystery, and it's impossible to understand these people like that. And I think...
And it's impossible to trust a person.
And I think the scene in, I think it's AP 6 that we were talking about, between Erika and Delanner. Is that AP 6 or 5?
Between Erika and Lambda.
Lambda, yes, but also the scene where Erika just randomly starts talking about how someone was allegedly cheating on her.
Oh, no, yeah, that was between her and Glenor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a really nice way to kind of unlearn only trusting the red text.
Yeah, because just like Erika was tunnel visioning into these things and not looking at the bigger picture, that's just like analyzing Umineko and we're looking at the red text and not the white text, and it's also just like trying to tackle a mystery novel without trusting that the author intended for you to be able to solve it with the clues is the same as trying, like, I'm trying to make a comparison here. I'm not sure I can verbalize it as I'm thinking about it, but like that whole playing in the mystery genre that Umineko talks about, like you have to trust the author that intended for you to solve it. It's just like Erika needs to trust her boyfriend, for fuck's sake, that this fucking thing she has built up in her head isn't what happened, if she means to like understand what's going on, just like you need to understand what's going on in the mystery.
Yeah, I do.
You need to trust the author for that.
I do think that sort of like the description of tunnel vision there is interesting, just because like, yeah, I think that sort of underlies what we were talking about with like the red text and how it's not the only reliable thing, because you do need to read between the lines. You need to understand what these people are saying and like their internality and sort of the implications of who they are as people, because she goes through all of those listed points and then Dlanor still says, you know, even with all of that, you still haven't been able to prove that I don't love you.
Yeah, because she's focusing on facts. What she's focusing on are facts, are things that happen, but it's missing all of the context around it.
So basically, Erika is facts don't care about your feelings.
Erika is just the best hero of Umineko. This has been said before.
Yeah, I mean, I think Erika's boyfriend probably is trash. Like, the evidence was pretty heavy,
like
right?
84 pieces of evidence that prove you cheated on me. Okay, but like here's 4 pieces of evidence that prove I still love you.
Okay, but you have to think about the fact that Erika is the one evaluating these things as proof that you don't love me or proof that you love me. So she could also be biased in her assessment.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you rephrase it as like proof that he's cheating on her, then I'd say it's pretty damning. Like, I don't know.
Also...
I mean, coming back to the theme of forgiveness, like, I don't know. I don't know if he's worth your time, Erika.
Yeah.
But I don't know if any relationship's really going to work out in the long run for Erika anyway.
We have faith in you, Erika. Come on.
Yeah.
It will work out with Dlanor. The power of husbands will win in the end.
The best ship in Umineko is Erika x Chopsticks.
True.
No, I like Erika with Dlanor.
Dlanor is also great.
Yeah, I think their dynamic is really sweet. I do think it's very... I think this kind of plays into the theme that we're talking about very well, where sort of Dlanor is the one who decides to be in her corner. Dlanor even comes to Battler in the Golden Land to be like, look, I know Erika is like super a piece of shit, but it's my job to stand by her and sort of like do what I can to help her. And then when later, when she's getting like basically abandoned by Byrne at the wedding, Dlanor says, you know, I wanted to stand up for you, not because I felt like I wanted to protect your argument, but because I felt like I wanted to protect you because nobody else was.
Yeah, I think Dlanor is perfect for Erika because, first of all, I don't think Erika is gonna like character develop into something that isn't Erika. So she's stuck with those trust issues. So I think Dlanor is the only person Erika can realistically be with, because Dlanor is the personification of a set of rules, and that set of rules is translated into red truth.
Yeah, so she can understand.
We know Erika can only trust the red truth, so of course she can only be with someone that represents the red truth.
In its own way, is like simultaneously like sweet, but also a little sad.
It is bittersweet.
I do think Erika might be able to change because of at the end of EB8, how you have the scene, and I only remember this because I rewatched it last night, that she's like, Angie and I were both witches of truth. What was the difference between her and I? How could she, like, hold on to this truth that's overwritten by the truth of the future? and I can't. Maybe I'm not really a witch of truth. Like, maybe, like, truth isn't my personality.
And then Battler counters, and he's like, yeah, no, you're not a witch. You're a detective.
True.
Yeah.
Which I actually really like that interaction. I think it's sort of, it underlies the way Battler also kind of forgives people, where, like, he has sort of the game function where he fights with them, but then afterwards he's like, okay, well, we're done. Good fight, everybody. Let's do it next Thursday.
Yeah. Alright, Erica, crazy move when you trap me in a logic error. Let's do it next week. I'll get you back for that.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got on the docket next.
I was going to say, Delano, when you were saying she's a embodiment of a set of rules, I was going to say not just a set of rules though. She's a set of rules that's there to make sure the mystery has a heart. Like the Van Dyne as well, but the Van Dyne and the Knox Decalogue, like they're there to like ensure that you don't have a heartless mystery with no point, and like I feel like that is a really good what do you call it? It matches really well with Erica, who basically just uses whatever red truth is on hand.
It especially fits very well with, I can't get like super deeply into the sort of like mystery genre fiction and stuff that was like the different categories that were happening in Japan around that time that is sort of dwelled in that episode, because I'd have to like look back at it all, and it's been a while. But I do think it's kind of interesting how Erica sort of more represents that area of like mystery as a game, as a sort of leisurely activity for you to feel smart about, where Battler is like, no, that's stupid. Why wouldn't you like want to know about the internal lives of the people you're speculating about? If you don't, then like, why does it matter?
Yeah, and that goes really well back to a conversation between Battler and Bernkastel about how, to Battler, games are a form of communication. They are, and to Byrne, it's just they're a method of deciding who wins and who loses. And as Byrne's piece, I feel like Erica might have a similar mindset to that. And so that kind of explains a little bit of her ruthlessness at times, as like, okay, I'm trying to win. I gotta win this game of mystery D&D.
Because every time she plays a game, she's fighting for her own identity as the victor. Because again, her pride is too much for her own good. Yeah. She's just too much. And I was gonna say, when we were talking about Van Dyne and Knox as being like this proof that this thing has heart, I was gonna bring up Will, because Will is the Van Dyne person, and Will, like, he retires, he strays away from Van Dyne because he thinks Van Dyne is too strict. So thinking about Van Dyne and Knox as things that Erika needs in her life, it just makes a really nice comparison between Erika and Will, because for Erika to feel comfortable in a relationship, she needs to be very fucking sure of this thing, needs to be very sure that this thing has a heart. And I guess Will is just cool and understands that you won't ever have that certainty in life, and you just have to go along with it, because life doesn't give you those kinds of certainties. And Van Dyne is too strict. If we're using Van Dyne and Knox as metaphors for relationships, Van Dyne is too strict and toxic, but Erika needs it.
Bringing up sort of the parallels between Erika and Will as well, I think that's kind of an interesting topic to touch on in regards to this, just because Will wants to figure out the truth, but does it in such a way that is not like directly imposing onto these people in an unnecessarily harsh way. Like, he still understands who they are as people and what their limits are. Erika does not treat them as people at all. She's just like, they're just constructs to get information from. She doesn't care how she has to do it. Whereas Will isn't content to step on their toes.
Damn, I didn't think we were gonna end up talking about the metaphorical implications of Van Dyne and Knox in this forgiveness episode, but I'm enjoying this discussion, guys. I'm liking all the tangents we're going on. What were you gonna say, Horsefly?
Oh, I thought you were going to say, but I forgive you.
Yes, I forgive you, because these have been really good tangents.
Yeah.
Any other forgiveness we might want to talk about?
I don't know. I mean, like, I'm certain there are other characters we could get into it about, but at that point, like, you know, we might just be running the circle with what we've already said about the others as well.
I kind of want to talk about the difference between why it's so hard and probably the wrong move to forgive Rosa, but why it's so comparatively easy to forgive Ava for how she treats Angie, despite still being, like, definitely not a model parent.
Okay.
And I think part of that might be, one, obviously we see a lot more of Rosa abusing Maria. We don't actually, I don't think Ava, like, ever physically abused Angie, although there's, like, a little bit of subtext with George that might imply a little bit, not to, like, abuse levels, but...
Well, yeah, Angie does sort of imply a little bit that some of that happened when she was being scolded by Ava. She talks about, like, you know, being repeatedly like having things drilled into her head, and then I can't remember exactly how she phrases it because it's been a hot minute, but she says some things that seem to sort of imply a level of physical violence being involved.
Okay. So then I have to question, is it just that we see more of like the good side of Ava with Angie, as opposed to the bad side of Maria with Rosa?
I think...
Yeah.
Go on.
I think the difference between Ava and Rosa is that Maria does forgive Rosa, and Rosa repeatedly offends, whereas Angie never forgives Ava for something that probably she didn't even do. There's, like, no forgiveness to be had there, and it only toxifies their... Like, both Maria and Angie's actions, in different ways, like, toxify the relationship.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd stick with that, because I don't know if the solution for Maria is that clear. She's, like, 9 years old. I don't think she can reliably do very much to actually do something about her situation, which is kind of the tragedy of it. But yeah. I think that's what I think. Like, we've seen what happens when you forgive Rosa, and, like, nothing good happens of it. So
Yeah. Rosa doesn't really accept that they've done something to be forgiven. Like, they don't really... She understands that what she did was bad, but that won't stop her from doing it again.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
What she needs is therapy.
Yeah. I still don't know how she assaulted a social worker in her house in front of her, like, 8-year-old daughter.
I know.
And got to keep Maria. Like...
True.
They were just like, wow, damn, that was crazy. That lady threw me to the ground. Anyway, leave her kid there, though.
This isn't a problem. This is a safe household for this child who I just saw you traumatize by killing their stuffed animal that they think is a real person.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that Maria would get taken off Rosa, but considering the fact that, like, Ryukishi does have that history, you'd think he of all people would know how that would end, which is just a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining...
I never thought about it, but I guess that does imply that social workers failed again.
I'm just implying, or not implying, I'm just imagining Ryukishi himself seeing, like, some crazy-ass situation and being like, no, like, this lady is, like, absolutely off the wall. Like, you need to take her child away. And then, like, you know, you cut to the cartoonishly inept, like, higher board, like, skill issue. If it were me, I would simply not feel that way.
Yeah. I think Rikishi, like, he's made it pretty clear that, like, he doesn't want people to come away thinking, you know, that it's the social workers or the institution that... Well, no, probably it is the institution that's failed, but, like, yeah.
I think also what we should keep in mind when he says things like that is, I think there is also kind of a need for him to be sort of professionally polite to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, he can't just come out and be like, fuck social workers, they suck. Like, he has to be like, no, there are good social workers out there that do their jobs very well. I understand this. I'm just saying that some of them maybe are not that good.
I think like
Go on.
Oh, I was going to say like most things. I think it's probably not the social workers themselves that are probably responsible for things like that. Yeah.
To wrap this all the way back around to the staff rooms, when he's talking about like big shadowy organizations that were controlling Takano, he like literally says in Matsuri Bayashi that he denotes like the world of man as the villain for the story, and that it is the institution that has caused all these problems for these people.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it's no one person.
Yeah. No one person is at fault, and no one person can change anything. Is like a lot of what Minagoroshi is about, at least.
Because everybody has to band together.
Yeah.
It does make me want to strangle like the entire like political elite that like puppeteered this, though.
Yeah.
And ironically, I do actually think this sort of factors back into the theme of forgiveness very well, because it's also sort of used in Umineko, but in a less, like, I don't want to say less broad, but a less, like, it's more personable, because it's less about sort of the, political institution, but more about the institution of a family, like the family hierarchy, the way that they're influenced by the culture and the things around them. Particularly with, how patriarchal the Ushirimiya family is, and how that sort of instills trauma into the family members by the way that they treat each other. And that just creates more resentment and, like, more abuse down the line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's as we said earlier in the episode. What was it? You hurt someone by hurting someone,
yeah,
right?
hurt people, hurt people.
Hurt people, hurt people.
Such a good quote. I really wish I knew where... If anyone in the comments section knows where that's from, please let me know.
Well, I personally have nothing else to talk about, do you?
I've crossed off everything on my notes list, except for, like, there's some things I don't think there's even anything to talk about.
For our dearly departed member, do we want to talk about Go Sotsu at all?
Does Go and Sotsu even deserve?
No, not usually, but...
Okay, let's quickly touch upon Go and Sotsu.
We already talked about Punish Tepe.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk... Okay. Satoko and Rika in Go and Sotsu. Does Satoko deserve to be forgiven? I wouldn't say so.
Probably not.
Satoko is just very weird in Go and Sotsu. She's just messed up for the sake of being messed up.
I think really my problem with that whole thing is, like, I think the setup exists where you can make Satoko sympathetic and you can properly convey what's going on with her. I just think that the way it was executed in the show itself is not done in that way.
From what I've seen of Megure, it is done a lot better in that show, in that manga, rather.
I would definitely agree with that.
One, it's not finished, and two, it's a good read. Go read it.
Where is it at this point? What arc is it in?
I think it's at Tatari Akashi, but I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, like last I read it, which was a little bit ago, they were doing Wata Akashi.
Yeah.
The second
arc.
Watanagashi? Like the Sotsu version of
I don't know.
Okay.
I need to like catch back up on it, but that was a few months ago.
So far, I think they've done a much more convincing job at setting up Satoko's general spiral and explaining her motives and stuff. And overall, I just think it keeps a consistency of character, which makes it a lot more believable. And therefore, a little bit more reasonable. Not like, obviously what Satoko's doing is still wrong, but it's still easier to understand where she's coming from, as opposed to Go Sotsu, where it's just like, she
Failed
just
me
suddenly
once,
goes
shame
sicko
on me.
mode.
Failed me twice. Eternal torture.
I think the biggest, I don't want to get too deeply into it, but I think the biggest change that has resonated with me in terms of how it is executed is that in the anime, Satoko sees all of like the eternal torture that Rika endured the first time, and she's like, whoa, screwed up. Anyway, who cares?
Yeah, she
and
doesn't react to any
in-
of it, really.
in Meguri, she kind of sees it like against her will. Like she doesn't even really want to see it. And then when she does, she's like absolutely traumatized to the point where like it kind of tips her over the edge a little bit.
Yeah, Meguri Satoko
Okay,
kind of
that's
rates
good.
as like a broken person, which
Mm-hmm.
like makes it a lot more understandable why she does what she does, but still not justifiable.
Yeah, and here's hoping there's a better, more understandable resolution to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes. Maybe once it's finished coming out, we can make an episode about it.
I'd be down for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But God forbid rewatching Go and Sotsu for that. We'll just have to go with memories we have. I'm not rewatching the show for the comparison.
I'm not even going to watch it a first time.
Yeah, don't. I really don't feel up to watching Go a third and a fourth time.
I already watched it twice because I had to watch Sotsu.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, that's that's a good way of putting it.
You're just watching Go twice. That's watching Sotsu.
Literally watching Sotsu is watching Go again, and then they tack on like 15 minutes of other stuff at the very end.
It's like how you say like a rewatch or a reread for Umineko is kind of integral to the experience. Because there's so much foreshadowing, but it's like doing that immediately after and everything is not as good as it was the first time.
Yeah.
Even though that's not true for Umineko, it's like what Sotsu is.
Oh yeah, rereading Umineko is both a very heartbreaking and simultaneously hilarious experience.
There's a lot of
I think
why.
one of my favorite examples of this is like early on, and it's either like episode 1 or 2 where they're going to the dock, and Kumasawa is like, "Oh, Rosa, you remembered to bring me this thing that I asked for. That's so sweet of you to remember." And Rosa's like, "Yeah, of course. We made this promise a year ago. It's not like I would ever forget something like that."
I would never break
just
a
like,
promise.
good lord, the shade being thrown at Battler right now.
Yeah. Okay. Is that all then?
I think I've
Yeah,
said everything.
that seems
Yeah, I'm done.
about like a good point for me.
Okay. I think we have a very interesting episode here. A lot of nice thoughts brought up, a lot of interesting things that our listeners are gonna hear about in like 2-3 weeks. You've never known this because you used to be on the other side of these episodes, but when I finish recording, at least I'm like, oh damn, I can't wait for people to hear about these amazing thoughts we just dished out in this episode. I can't believe these things happen, and I'm only now hearing about it from the other members. It's an interesting experience, and I get like, oh yeah, I can't wait for people to know about it.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. Okay, then with that being said, we hope you enjoyed the episode. Everybody sign off. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Kakite.